Oh yeah, so shall I record now? Yeah, okay. All right.
Do you want me to start? I thought that President Xi's New Year address was in great contrast to the New Year that we face here in the UK. It was an optimistic speech. It was full of references to China's progress over the last year in eliminating absolute poverty, in environmentalism, harmony with nature, in scientific progress, and progress in containing and preventing COVID-19 from spreading across the country. In this country, we have the new variant, Omicron variant of COVID-19 is spreading out of control. We have a 90% increase in hospitalizations in the last week alone. We have a rise in in-work poverty and a rise in child poverty over the last year. So it's certainly refreshing for a person in Britain to hear about what can be achieved in another country that is taking a much more people-first approach to solving the problems facing humanity, whereas our government is completely in hock to major corporations, and as a result, no policy is enacted unless it makes a profit for a small minority, and that's why Britain is failing to address these problems in the way that China has been able to.
And also, President Xi said China will hold the Beijing 2022 in February. So, would you like to send your respond to that?
I'm looking forward to watching the Winter Olympics in February 2022. Of course, it was 10 years ago that we had the Olympics in London. And I was actually in Beijing for the Olympics in 2008 when China last hosted the Summer Olympics, I think it was in that year. The Olympics are a time of international cooperation and putting aside differences. And that stretches all the way back to the original Olympics in ancient Greece, when the wars between the different cities of ancient Greece would be paused for that period while everybody competed at the games. So I think it's a real shame that the United States is trying to embarrass China over these Olympics, saying it will launch a diplomatic boycott of the Olympics, which means nothing because the Olympics are a sporting event. But the attempt by the US and its allies, unfortunately, including the UK, is, I think, not in the spirit of Olympic cooperation. This is an opportunity to try to stop the new Cold War we see developing from becoming too serious, and it's an opportunity to try to resolve these differences. And I believe that Western governments should think again and take part fully in this important international competition.
And also for climate change, China and US have signed something on the climate change COP26. So yeah, so what's your comment?
I think that climate change is a huge problem facing the entire world, and that the Chinese approach has a lot to teach other countries, because China is investing much more heavily in renewable energy, in green energy, and in scientific development than any Western country. And we saw, I think, just this week, the news that the artificial sun in China has been able to set a new world record for running longer than ever before at a high plasma temperature. That doesn't mean very much to us who are not scientists, but through nuclear fission, China is actually developing ways to develop clean energy that would be potentially really important for solving the world's energy needs without polluting the environment. So I think that's a huge contrast again to the West, where in the United States we see a single senator is blocking Joe Biden's green reforms. That model of the senator in question has extensive interests in the coal industry, and we see there the intertwining of corporate power and political power in the West, which is preventing action on climate change. So I was very impressed by China's progress this year. I think that again in President Xi's speech, it's clear that China is beginning to also address the question of a beautiful environment, setting up new national parks. I think that's very important. When I lived in China, it was one of the main concerns that people had, that the countryside was becoming very polluted. And I believe that China is now taking action around those concerns as well.
I think Morningstar had a very good working relationship with CMG, and also cover quite a lot of CPC 100-year achievements. And so what's your comment on it, and what's your expectation next year?
I've been really delighted over the past couple of years to have started working much more closely with the China Media Group. I think this year the high point was when we cooperated over the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, and CMG prepared a video for us on the roots of some Chinese Communist Party members who learned about Marxism working in Europe, including Zhou Enlai and Deng Xiaoping. So that video was broadcast at a Morningstar public meeting, and we had amazing feedback from readers who were really interested by these stories that they hadn't heard before about the links between Chinese Communist Party and Europe. So that's very positive, but we also had lots of other cooperation with regular articles around the new Cold War, the importance of peace and cooperation, and around COP26. So I'm delighted by all of these developments, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work closely with China Media Group in the coming year. Shen Haixiong, in his New Year's address, he spoke about the coverage from Afghanistan, in particular when the United States was defeated in Afghanistan in August, and the atrocities such as the killing of 10 civilians, including 7 children, by a US drone in Kabul. And I think it's really important that more Western media outlets are paying attention to what China Media Group is saying, because a lot of this news will be not covered very seriously in Western media. And we see at the moment a very important case as the United States is trying to extradite Julian Assange from Britain to face up to 175 years in prison simply for having published material about US war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we see how the West is trying to silence voices who expose crimes by the US Army and allied armies. So it's really important that we have other media who are covering these stories.
And also for the combat COVID-19, we know the new variant, and also China donates quite a lot for vaccination to some countries. So what's your impression on it?
I think that if we contrast China to most Western countries on COVID-19, we can see how far superior the Chinese approach to this problem has been. The zero COVID strategy and the rapid isolation of positive cases with provision of support for people to isolate is completely different from what we've seen here, where we had a simply handing huge sums of public money to friends of ministers in the government to prepare, who had no experience in creating a test and trace system or delivering public health contracts. And as a result, we've had a really shambolic approach to the pandemic. And we just, there's an American term, Groundhog Day, where you see the same thing again and again and again. And I think COVID in Britain feels like that. Like we've made no progress since March 2020. Every few months we have another crisis, another peak, and everybody's worried about another lockdown. So the Chinese approach has been better in that sense. But I also believe that there are deeper reasons for China's success. The reason that the British government has been unable to combat COVID-19 is linked to the privatization of many public services, the role of outsourcing, so that you have workers who are on poverty wages with no sick pay working in hospitals for outside contractors who will not, they will not inform their employer if they are positive because they cannot afford to take time off sick. You have a huge level of poverty in the country with nobody having any savings, so people are frightened to take time off work. and you also have a lack of confidence in the government, and we're seeing this now in the some people refusing to take the vaccine. I'm not saying that's a huge problem. Most British people have been prepared to take the vaccine, and it's not just a British problem either. There are lots of other countries where this is the case. But because people do not trust the British government, there is more limited compliance with requests to socially distance and so on. And people feel very bored, I think, and weary. They feel this has been going on for 2 years. They just don't want another lockdown, and they won't cooperate if one is announced. So that shows the importance of having a people first system as well, like the Chinese, that actually Chinese people will cooperate with national policy because they understand that it is directed at everybody's welfare, but also that it's going to work. If you know that your lockdown is going to be for a few weeks and then things can go back to normal, then that's okay. But if you think that the government is going to keep announcing this every 2 months for the rest of your life, then people become much angrier.
I like your jumper, really Chinese color, lucky red. So yeah, this year is a year for tiger. I would like to send some message to Chinese people, viewers, and also your counterparts in China.
Well, I'm very happy to extend best wishes for the year of the tiger to everyone in China and Chinese people around the world. I'm a year of the rat person, so I don't know very much about the particular attributes of the tiger, but I'm hopeful that this will be a very good year for the Chinese people, because it's coming from a very good start in terms of we have the Olympics early in the year, we have the achievements of China in space, in science and development. I think it will be a great year for the Chinese people. The Chinese New Year is not till February, is that correct?
Yeah, in February. Yeah, right. And also, we know you have been in China and learned Chinese language, right?
It's been about 10 years, so I don't know if I will pass any tests.
Yeah. So when you read the message from presidency, have you noticed some Chinese idioms? Any words impressed you most?
Oh, actually, the only idiom that I was taken aback by was from Shen Haixiang's address, which was about elephants dancing hip hop, which I had never heard this phrase before. It strikes me as very unusual.
Interesting, right? Xuan, do you have anything to add on, or would like to ask Ben?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, there is one question that I want to raise. There is in President Xi's speech, there is different angles in different paragraphs. And is there any perspective that you didn't expect him to mention?
I mean, I don't know. Some aspects of this speech were a bit new to me in that I hadn't heard Xi Jinping talk about the Yellow River, the Yangtze River, the achievements in that those fields. I think that the striking thing for a Western reader of this speech is the way in which the revolutionary tradition is woven into the much longer history of China. And you see that Xi Jinping quotes a conversation between Mao Zedong and it was Huang Yanpei in the speech as well. And there's a real pride in China's revolutionary past, in the achievements of the Communist Party and the revolution, which I think some previous Chinese leaders were less keen to promote when they were addressing a global audience. But at the same time, a reference to the ancient history of China, the Yangtze River, the Yellow River, and the sort of mother rivers of the Chinese nation. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Is there any like wisdom of the East or Chinese way of thinking or Chinese philosopher, let's say, differs from the West that impressed you most?
Well, the phrase that if we do not fail nature, nature shall never fail us, for example, I think that there is a Far Eastern tradition of harmony with nature, which is more prominent than we see in the West. You see that in the Taoist and Buddhist traditions in particular. And I think that, as I mentioned, the new national parks and environmental protection measures being taken in China, his references to the elephants and their migration, the Tibetan antelope, those are things which we don't see so much in the West, this appreciation for nature. It's also, I think, a contrast to some of China's history, because in the Mao era, there was an idea of getting rid of the 4 pests and saying that we need to eliminate harmful animals and so on. And I think that the modern approach understands that we need to live alongside the natural world, not try too much to interfere with nature, because it can go disastrously wrong, as we now know, through phenomena like climate change.
Thank you. 我找问完了。
Oh, right. And I think it's very interesting. The last bit is about the at the end of the New Year address about the together. I mean, it's echo to the Olympic slogan. Together we face the future, something like that. So do you remember that?
Yes, I mean, I think that it's a sort of inspirational ending to the speech, as he talks about the achievements of the Chinese people, the coming Olympics, but also the astronauts in space. Something like Shen Haixiong also referred to in his New Year address in terms of how inspirational these discoveries can be and what we're learning about the natural world. I think that message of unity is an important one, and Xi Jinping does talk, of course, about the outstanding issues around Taiwan in particular, the need to reunify China, which I think is important too, because Western governments are interfering in various parts of the world. We see it in Europe as well, with the issues around Ukraine, where the United States is trying to impose its will by dividing other peoples and other countries. And I think Xi Jinping has made it clear that the Chinese people will not be divided.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Happy New Year. Thank you for your time.
Happy New Year to you too. I hope we get to meet up soon in the new year.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully.
Cheers.
Okay.
Bye, Julie.
Okay,
Bye.
bye, Ben. Okay.